I want to read something out of this little book that I've got. If I can find it. Let me just find it. This little booklet I've published. Claire, I'll just tell you a little bit about Set in Stone, which is a book that Claire and myself have written. It's about the stone roses. And I photographed the stone roses 14 times. And we've written a book, and it's got 20,000 words in it, which is pretty unusual for a photographic book, because most photographers bring out a book and it's just a load of pictures. But this is all my personal experiences, and Claire's given a great skill. Claire's my partner. You've been half introduced to Claire. We're going to bring Claire on in a little bit. And so we've written this book, but there were certain things in the book that couldn't go in, so I've published my own. And this little book I'm giving away in a postcard box set that I've got a few here tonight if anyone wants to have a look or to buy one, and the book comes free with it. But yeah, I've stopped doing live gigs. Let me tell you why. So this is kind of musings and little sayings and little bits of experiences that couldn't go in our book Set in Stone about the stone roses. Here we go. Tilton explained. When I was taking live pictures at big gigs in the 80s and early 90s, we were able to photograph the whole set. And then in the mid-90s, someone said, "You can do the first 3 songs only." Now the first 3 songs are useless. The band hasn't gotten into their stride. They aren't even sweating. And that's what great live rock and roll photography is all about. Atmosphere and sweat and the band getting lost in music. That's never going to be at the beginning of a set. It's always going to be near the end. Do you think I would have gotten those classic photographs of Kurt Cobain smashing his guitar in the first 3 numbers? And that's what happened. Even, someone of with my experience, and they don't give a shit that who the photographer is. They just go, first 3 songs only. And you go down, and you'll be probably saying, yeah, I'm sure that's not true. If the band give you permission to do that, then it'll happen. But it doesn't happen that way. The band gives me permission to go down, to take the whole set, and then some meathead bouncer comes along and goes, "Right, get off." And no, he's given me permission to photograph the whole lot. Don't believe you? Off you go. So every gig of big bands is a major hassle. So I've just stopped doing it now. It's not the only reason I've stopped doing it. The other reason is that can't earn any money from it either. It's taken the joy out of it for me, and I've campaigned against this. And I've put the word out to other photographers in the UK and Europe, and nothing's changed. And so you're getting great photographers taking pictures, but they're not getting the best out of a show. And it needs the promoters basically to just lift that embargo on it, if that's what you're going to call it. It's not an embargo; it's just silliness. We can't get great photographs because they go first 3 numbers only, and off you get. So nothing's changed on there.
Is that with all bands?
Well, some of the bands that are on the way up at the smaller gigs, yeah, you can photograph them for a long time. I'd like to welcome a band tonight called Chinwag, who are a really brilliant band. Welcome, guys, from Warrington and Manchester, and we've got Inda as well, who's a pretty local lad, not far away, about 10 miles. And Inda's played with Ian Brown. These guys are great. They do their own music. They call it D-Funk. So these guys will let me photograph the whole gig. I'm going to be photographing in about a week's time as well. So it's better. I most prefer just working with bands that I just like, rather than I just don't go and photograph the big bands anymore. The fuckers issued a contract that said anybody that photographs us on this tour doesn't own those pictures. They can use them for the one sole purpose that they have to state on the contract. So in which case, if you were from the Manchester Evening News or the local Leeds paper, you have to state who it's for. And then it says, for the price of £1, the Stone Roses buy your pictures off you, can use them for any purpose and don't have to credit you. So I phoned up Steve Adge, who's their road manager. Well, he was their road manager, but he's now their advisor. That's what he describes himself as.
Basically, sounding quite totalitarian, is this?
Well, that's what it is, isn't it? It's fascist because John Squire is an artist, but if someone told John Squire, right, John, you've got to do a painting, but if I buy that painting off you, John, for a quid, I buy that painting, I can use it on an album cover, I can use it on television, I don't even have to credit you, John Squire, and I don't have to pay you anything, basically. But he'd say no, wouldn't he? So I got in touch with him and I said, Steve, you've got to tell the band that this is absolutely wrong and they're looking really foolish. And they didn't get back to me. So I then put the word out on Facebook. And I said, look, I'm going to do something. I said to Steve, I'm going to do something about this if nothing happens. Didn't get a word. So I boycotted all the photographers. I got all the photographers and 3 photographic unions out on the Stone Roses when they played Heaton Park not to photograph that gig. And loads of people followed and wouldn't photograph them, and they were all with me. And I got the Stone Roses to change the contract, but it still wasn't good enough. And I wrote out a contract and said, this is what we are prepared to do. And I said, if you're worried that we're going to take photographs and use them on merchandise, they don't want photographs on T-shirts, they don't want photographs on posters, because that's how bands make their money nowadays. They don't make money from records, do they? Because basically they don't sell records. So quite right, everyone's got to make a buck, haven't they? So I said, right, I'll sign a contract that says I won't use these pictures from Heaton Park on merchandising, so you can make money at that, but I want these pictures. If a magazine from Japan phones me up and says, Ian, can we use your pictures from Heaton Park? I can say yes, and they can pay me 80 quid or 100 quid for the use of it. It's called licensing, basically. And they didn't like that. They wouldn't do it, and I thought it was perfectly reasonable. And they wouldn't. I said, right, well, if you wanna talk with me, let's talk about it. Let's get some common ground. And they wouldn't talk.
Really?
So I just called everybody out. We got 3 unions, and we called it out. But the Sun and the NME didn't go for it. So they took photographs. They went to Heaton Park and they took photographs.
Which are now being owned by Stone Roses for a quid.
They're owned by the Stone Roses for a quid, if they want.
So there is power in a union? Still.
There's no power. There's not much power in the union. The union's powers have gone. I've been a union member for as long as I've been taking pictures, but it falls flat when young photographers come along and they just go, well, I don't give a shit because I want to get my folio together. So I'm basically for me, and I'm not interested in the photographic profession. I'm just out to get a folio so I can get a leg up, basically, and then it falls flat. If you don't stick together, you just get exploited.
That experience must have really soured, what is a beautiful set of images that from before they were famous, right up to arguably with the music, of course. Those images, are part of that band's history, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, but what people might not realise is just how, particularly, we've got video now, so maybe people's first introduction to a band is seeing them on YouTube. But then, the first introduction to a band wasn't hearing the tune, it was seeing the photograph. And then if you like the look of the photograph, you'd read about the band. That's the way that it works. So the photograph was majorly important. So the photographer and the way that he or she puts the band across gives the public, tells the public what they need to know about that band. It's majorly important stuff. Not so much now. The video more so, I think. But you do kind of hear, you see the video and you hear the music at the same time. But before that, you didn't hear the music. You saw the picture, you read about them, and then you went out of your way to listen to them, didn't you? So yeah, it soured it. And me and Claire went to Heaton Park. I was talking to Murray Chalmers, who's their publicist. He's from London, but he was working up in Manchester at the time, and so I said, Murray, are they not going to bend on this contract? And he goes, well, you've got your answer. So I had to leave it at that. And he goes, I don't suppose you want to go to the gig now, do you? And I went, of course I want to go to the gig. I definitely want to go to the gig. So I got tickets for me and Claire to go. But yeah, of course it took the edge off. I said, I'm just boycotting the gig. I still love the band's music. Sure, it's taken the edge off, you know, but how many rock and rollers are shitheads? Absolutely loads of them, aren't there? Chuck Berry, right, what a fantastic artist, but he put video cameras in women's cubicles of the toilets. What a guy, you know what I mean? What about James Brown? You know, he went speeding off down the road, could have killed loads of children because he was off his face, and he didn't say sorry. He got jailed for that. You know, this is what rock and roll's about. You know, I'm not saying like, you know, that everyone's good and everyone's evil, aren't they? We all have the choice. But the Stone Roses wouldn't open up any dialogue, so I don't know what that was all about. They just had a blanket ban on talking.